Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Dedicated Hearts made Fullmetal in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Our First Victory. Alright people, yelled Ian, this is it, we're here. Eren, Mikasa, you two are carrying Edward and Alphonse. Eren, as soon as the Elrics split the boulder into two, you transform, got it? Yes sir, responded Eren. Ed grabbed onto Eren and Alphonse onto Mikasa, and the squad leapt off the wall. Rico stayed behind. She raised her pistol upwards and fired a signal flare to commence the mission. The small squad soared through the air, approaching closer and closer to their objective as they were thrown through the sky at speeds which the Elrics be possible for ordinary people. They were maybe a few streets away from the large rock. It was large, dauntingly so. It was possibly the size of a titan and no doubt heavier than one. Ed wondered how Eren was even going to manage carrying half of this, let alone the whole thing. Eren, shouted Ed, land on the boulder. Okay, responded Eren. He fired the cables onto nearby buildings, propelling himself through the sky one last time. They landed on top of the large rock and everyone else landed onto the nearby buildings. Ed dismounted from Eren's back and lowered himself to the street below, making sure to be clear of everyone when he transformed into his titan. Ed clapped his hands together and placed them on the boulder, sparks flying between his fingers. The boulder split cleanly into two pieces. Ed slides down the smooth edge of the split boulder to the floor. He then transmuted the half boulder into large stone ball, a last-minute adjustment to the original plan. This should make it easier to carry, stated Ed. Eren, yelled Ian, you're up. Eren raised his hand to his mouth and bit down. A bolt of lightning then strikes Eren from above. There was a bright light which blinded everyone close by, followed by an intense heat which invaded the space around Eren. The group watched through squinted eyes as a large 15-meter muscular titan with oily black hair and intense bright green eyes formed in front of them. It let out a deafening roar which shook the earth. Mikasa observed the large square-shaped rock. Even when a part of it has been taken off and transformed into something more manageable, carrying it still seems like a daunting task. Eren's titan may not have the strength, but he has the willpower. The titan approached the large ball rock and stopped. It turned its body and looked downwards to face Ed, who was standing off to its side. The titan raised its foot and attempted to stomp of Ed. Reacting quickly to the incoming threat, Ed leapt to the side and avoided certain death as the foot of the titan crushed the ground beneath it. Brother, yelled Alphonse. Eren, yelled Mikasa. The titan raised its foot again, ready to deliver another stomp. Clambering to his feet, Ed quickly avoided the second attack. The garrison soldiers could only watch in stunned at the scene. Landing roughly on the ground, Ed looked up to face Eren's titan. His heart and stomach sank as the large titan stared down at him with its piercing green eyes. He realized now why Alphonse stood still when he came face to face with the titan back in the supply room. When you're this close to one of them and see no way out, it's difficult to stop. The sheer terror and panic overwhelm you. Every opponent he faced back home was at least person-sized but being stared down, but these monsters made him truly feel like a bug about to be squished. Mikasa swung herself onto Eren's titan and landed on his face, her foot on its large nose and her hand holding onto its hair. Damn it, Eren, she yelled, snap out of it, we have a breach to seal. Don't you recognize us? Ackerman, yelled Ian, get away from him, he's dangerous. The mission is a failure, Rico muttered to herself as she loaded a red flare into the pistol and pointed it to the sky. We never should have pinned our hopes on something so unknown. She fired the red flare into the sky. Ed and Alphonse watched as the red stream of smoke was shot upwards into the sky. Mission failed? Have we failed? Alphonse thought. Eren's titan stared at Mikasa. It raised its fist and was about to swing when suddenly a large spike struck its chest and protruded from its back. Mikasa quickly jumped in reaction to the sudden attack on Eren and landed on the nearby rooftop. The titan struggled for a while. It clawed at the spike sticking out of its chest as it let out a loud cry. The garrison soldiers and Mikasa looked down to see Ed, standing behind large spike which impaled Eren's titan, with his hands on the ground. The titan's clawing at the spike became less and less frantic until its body fell limp on the spike, stuck in a standing on its feet as smoke escaped its wounds. Alphonse climbed down from the rooftop to Ed. Brother, are you okay? He asked, a look of concern on his face. I'm fine, Al, he replied with a smile. He placed his hand on Alphonse's shoulder. his expression then became more stern. "We're not running away from this, Al." They looked up to see Titan Aaron's limp body and a faint red smoke line in the sky. "We're sealing the gap." "So the kid was just another mindless Titan?" asked Mitabi as they observed Aaron's Titan's seemingly lifeless body. "Sir!" shouted a soldier nearby. "We've got 2 Titans heading for our position, a 10-meter class and a 6-meter class. 12-meter approaching from the rear," shouted another. "Ian, we have to withdraw, the mission a bust," said Mitabi. "Agreed, we'll get the Elrics and fall back," added Rico. They turned their heads to face them, expecting them to be near the large spike. Instead they gasped to see they had suddenly vanished. "Where the hell did they run off to?" yelled Rico. On top of wall rows the cadets and garrison soldiers watched in great disappointment and gut-wrenching sadness at the red smoke line in the sky. Armin stood next to Marco and Mina next to Annie as they observed the red column. "It's over, the mission was a failure," said Marco. "My friends," cried one of the cadets, "they were killed like animals and it was for nothing." "How?" muttered Armin. "What went wrong? Has something happened to them?" "Aaron," Mikasa. He placed down the bundle of canisters and ran off, following in the direction which the garrison elite squad, his friends, and the Elrics went off to. "Armin!" yelled Marco. "Where are you going?" "Armin!" yelled Mina as she watched. She hesitated in staying put or running off after one of her squad mates. She started to run, following Armin. "Armin, wait up!" Back on the rooftops, Ian, Rico, and Mitabi argued over whether they should retreat. "In case you two have forgotten, I'm in command and I'm saying the mission continues," yelled Ian. "We're not about to abandon Cadet Jaeger or the Elrics. We'll have to keep them off of him and hope that the Elrics use that flare gun to signal their location. Like it or not, there may be the best chance we have." "This is insane," retorted Rico, frustrated by Ian's stubbornness. "Just look at him, he's a failure, and for all we know the Elrics could have abandoned us and headed back to where they came from. Face it, the 3 of them cost the lives of hundreds of good soldiers." "With all due respect, squad leader, those 2 seemed dead set in wanting to seal the breach. No doubt they'd left complete the mission," responded Mikasa. She didn't know whether they truly meant it, but she hoped that if they could be convinced to stay, that then they wouldn't abandon Aaron. "We're replaceable. There will be hundreds of soldiers ready to take our place, ready to take the place of our fallen, but those 3, they're not. No one can do what they can. They're the best bet we have, so if it means fighting to the last man, then fight to the last man." Rico and Mitabi gasped. "Are you insane?" questioned Rico. "Tell me then," yelled Ian. "Tell me how the hell we retake Trost? How do we retake Wall Maria, and how the hell can we beat the Titans? If any one of you has a better plan, then I'm all ears. If not, then tell me, how the hell do we win without those 3? If you're asking me how we can defeat the Titans, then obviously I don't have an answer," said Rico passive-aggressively. "Exactly, that's why we can't afford to retreat just now. The situation looks like a complete mess up, but I have one thing, hope. Hope in Aaron Yeager to pull himself together and stick to his part of the plan, and hope that somewhere in this war zone the Elrics are trying to find their own way in sealing that breach and making sure that the brave deaths of our comrades weren't in vain." Ed and Alphonse hid with their backs against the wall in an alleyway as they waited for the 12-meter-tall Titan to pass. They'd been constantly running and ducking for cover every so often now, but were able to get close to the breach. They quietly passed behind the Titan and into one of the destroyed buildings by taking cover in the rubble. For some reason the Titans seemed to be heading along the path they came from, but not at them specifically. "Looks as though most of them are still at that corner," said Ed, peering over a broken bit of wall to see if any more had wandered past the street. "Still, we'll have to get past the ones who are still coming through the breach," said Alphonse. They sprinted to another building close by. Transmuting a door, they entered the building and made their way to one of the windows. They peered through the window and saw another building, some open space between them and the moving heads of 4 Titans who were maybe 8 to 10 meters tall. This must mean that they were close to the breach by now. "Wait for them to pass, then we make a run for the building ahead." No doubt if they ran for it now they would be spotted instantly by them. They didn't want to go up against a small group entirely on their own. It was likely they could stand their ground, but it would be a time-consuming slog. When the small group of Titans had passed, they climbed out of the window and made a run for the building ahead. They quickly placed their backs against the wall and shuffled to the side of the building. When they reached edge, Ed peered out again. His eyes widened when he saw it. "The breach," he whispered. "It's right there. There's some open space between the breach and the buildings, so we're going to have to make a run for it. Looking at the massive hole, it looked as though it'll take a bit of time to seal the breach. We'll have to avoid a fight with any titans and focus solely on closing it. Just as they began to move, a familiar roar stopped them in their tracks. That must be Aaron, said Alphonse. Come on, Al, said Ed, ignoring Alphonse's observation. We've still got a hole to plug. They ran into the open space. They came to an instant halt when they saw a group of 3 more titans enter through the hole. The monsters quickly took notice of them and began heading towards them. Both Edward and Alphonse clapped their hands ready to transmute and dispatch the small group. Suddenly their attention was diverted to the right of them when the 4 titans who passed them on the main road were now spilling out of the mouth of the road and trotting slowly towards them. Damn it! Yelled Ed, realizing that they were about to be overwhelmed. He reached into his right pocket and griped the pistol. He aimed it into the sky and pulled the trigger, sending a long purple column of smoke into the clouds. When Armin and Mina arrived at the boulder, Mikasa had to explain the situation to the 2 quickly. Aaron had attacked Ed. Ed then managed to incapacitate Aaron's titan by impaling it. Ed and Al had run off somewhere. No doubt they were heading to the breach, and now the garrison squads were trying to hold off the titans from Aaron while also staying alert for the purple flare to signal the Elric's position, but the continual pressure being placed on them was becoming too much to handle, and the possibility of being overrun was becoming more and more inescapable by the minute. I'm pulling Aaron out, yelled Armin. You two, just hold off the incoming titans. He climbed up the slanted spike and fired his grappling hooks into the titan's shoulders and aimed his blade. Armin, don't, yelled Mina. No, yelled Mikasa. Mikasa and Mina watched as Armin plunged his blade into the titan's neck. The seemingly lifeless body now jolted back to life as it let out a loud roar and began thrashing at the spike sticking out of its chest once more. Armin tried to keep his feet planted onto the stone spike and held onto his blade. Very quickly the titan fell limp again. You two, just hold off the titans, yelled Armin. There are others who need help. He was interrupted by the distant sound of a pistol being fired. The 3 of them looked up to see a purple line of smoke stretch upwards into the sky. Near the breach, that's Edward and Alphonse. I'm going in to help them, said Mina as she fired the cables of her onto nearby buildings. Armin nodded at her. They weren't the only ones to notice. The garrison soldiers who were currently occupied with protection of Aaron spotted the flare and now had to move to protect the Elrics who were right at the breach. Rico, yelled Ian, take your team and go in to support the Elrics. Rico nodded at Ian. Team, head for the breach. Alphonse rolled to the side, avoiding the large hand which swooped down to grab him. He then slammed his hands down on the ground, transmuting a long spike which stuck the titan's neck. Ed slid underneath the legs of a 5-meter-tall titan, narrowly avoiding its grasp. He skidded his hands across the ground, transmuting a trident spear and throwing it and striking the nape of the neck. So far they had managed to kill 3 of the titans swarming them while trying to avoid being snatched by the others. 2 more titans, with heights ranging from 4 to 7 meters, entered through the breach. The fight was now shifting from a manageable skirmish to a tense battle for their lives. They had to now hold out long enough for the garrison soldiers to aid them. Ed and Alphonse were now standing back to back as the titans began to encircle them. The situation was now dire and they had to act fast, else they'll end up as titan food. We not dying here, yelled Ed. Not after everything we've been through. They both clapped their hands together, Edward transmuting a halberd from the ground and Alphonse slamming his hand onto the ground. A cluster of spikes, pillars and jagged rocks formed around them, causing the titans to either stumble back or fall over. Ed was lifted from the ground by one of the pillars emerging from the ground. He leapt off the pillar and plunged the end of his halberd into both eyes of a 7-meter-tall titan. The titan let out a loud cry as Ed lifted the spear from its eye and quickly climbed to the top of its head. The titan bowed its head slightly, leaving its nape vulnerable to Ed, who quickly plunged his halberd into its nape, holding onto it as the titan collapsed onto the ground. Alphonse skid his hands across the ground, transmuting a partisan spear. Charging at one of the fallen titans, he plunged it into its throat and with all the strength that he could muster forced it through. Trying to reach the nape, the titan squirmed for a bit before falling still. They had now taken out 5 titans so far, with only 4 left. Ed and Al regrouped, putting distance between them and the remaining titans. Both Ed and Al were panting heavily as they tried to regain their composure. They took up defensive stances ready for another attack. They watched as the titans, who ranged from 12 meters tall and 5 meters, came at them in a disorganized fashion. Suddenly the sound of cables zipping towards them caught their attention. they saw a blurry figure fly towards the largest titan, striking its nape, a streak of blood flying off to the side as the largest titan collapsed to its knees and on its face. The blurry figure landed on the side of the wall, the cables of their ODM gear holding them in place. Their eyes widened when they saw who it was. "Mina," they said in unison. Mina looked down at her blades, titan blood evaporating into the air, and the noises around her were muffled as she was overwhelmed by the loud thumps of her fast-beating heart. For just a few seconds she had blocked out the world to fully take in what she'd done. I did it," she said softly, amazed by just saying those words. "I killed a titan." She then came back to her sense as she saw the titans continue to approach the Elrics. She pointed the handles of her blades at them, the adrenaline still flowing through her body and drunk on the adrenaline. But the sound of more cables zipping forward stopped her. Rico's squad had arrived at the scene. Leaping from the buildings, they ambushed the remaining titans and made quick work out of them, slicing their napes as blood and thick chunks of skin fell to the ground. Mina fired her cables towards the Elrics, landing next to them, but before they could utter a word to each other, Ed and Alphonse were called out. "Elrics," said Rico in an authoritative tone, "just what the hell were you thinking when you ran off like that?" They turned to face her, Ed crossing his arms. Alphonse counted the number of people who came with Rico, 3 in total. Weren't there more of them? He thought, while Mina greeted the squad leader with a salute. "Sealing the hole in the wall," responded Ed. "We were gonna use our alchemy to stretch the wall and seal the breach. When Aaron lost control, we didn't see any other option, so we made a break for the hole." "And you didn't think to tell us?" Rico replied. "You two thought that during a military operation you could just go and carry out the objective by yourself and break the chain of command. We saw you fire that red flare into the sky, meaning the mission was a failure. I couldn't accept that, so Al and I left to finish the job," Ed argued. "You disobeyed a direct order," replied Rico. "Had you two been soldiers, you'd be charged with desertion, but if you can seal the hole, then do it. Don't know why we couldn't have done that in the first place," she thought. Rico then turned to her squad members. "Isabel, climb the top of the wall. I want to know if and when more titans enter the breach. Isaac, head for that building there. I want to know if more titans already in the city are heading our way. And Alice, head for the top of the breach. You'll have to ambush any titans that come, though." She then turned to Mina. "Cadet Carolina, follow Alphonse to the left side of the breach and cover him. I'll follow Edward." Everyone ran towards their position. As Ed and Al crossed the bridge over the trenches, both stared at the breach in awe at the size. It must have been about over 15 meters tall, taller than some of the titans they're seen during their time here. They wondered about the strength and size of the titan which could make such a breach. Rico and Mina fired their cables above the boys and hung right above them. Ed and Alphonse climbed over some of the rubble to reach the base of the wall, and they were now standing right next to the breach. They clapped their hands together. "On the count of 3, Al!" yelled Ed. 1, 2, 3. They slammed their hands on the wall. "Nothing." Their eyes widened again. "Al!" yelled Ed, and they clapped their hands and slammed them onto the wall, expecting the wall to stretch out and cover the breach. Instead, nothing happened. "What the?" Ed muttered. "Hey, what the hell is going on?" yelled Rico. "I thought you said you two can seal the breach." "This doesn't make sense," Ed responded. "This wall should just be made of bricks and cement." "What the hell does that have to do with anything?" replied Rico impatiently. "In order to perform alchemy, we need an understanding of the atomic structure of an object," he explained. "What the hell is this wall made out of?" "Squad leader," said the garrison soldier coming down from atop the wall. 5 titans, around 7 and 13 class-meter classes approaching the breach. "We won't be able to hold this position," thought Rico. "We'll have to fall back." "Sir," said the other soldier coming from the buildings. He stood on the wooden bridge over the trenches. "It's Cadet Jaeger's Titan. It's got the boulder. He's coming from the left road and he's heading for our position." Thud. 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 They turned to face the direction of heavy footsteps coming from their left. "Because this was the world I was born into. It's my world, not theirs." A mass cloud of smoke emanated from the chest as the Titan erupted back to life. It began clawing at the spike in its chest again. It held the spike sticking out of its chest and with all of its strength broke the end off, freeing itself from its implement. Armin stared through the hole in its body and watched as it repaired itself. The Titan turned and faced the large stone ball. It grabbed at the large rock and lifted it onto its shoulders and made its way towards the breach. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw Eren carrying the large ball-shaped rock on his shoulders as his hands held it in place. Rico gritted her teeth. "Everyone hold this position," she commanded. "I don't want to see another Titan step foot in Trost." Ed ran into the center of the breach. He saw the 5 Titans begin to enter through the massive tunnel, forming a single file through the tunnel. Ed walked into the tunnel, clapped his hands and slammed them on the ground, transmuting a large spike which impaled the line of Titans through their stomachs, holding them in place. They began thrashing at the spike in pain. "That should hold them for now," yelled Ed to the garrison soldiers. "Now hurry." Both Mitabi and Ian's squad arrived to secure the area around the breach. The area was absent of Titans in their way, evidenced by the skeletons of the dead Titans who were dispatched by the Elric's and Rico's squad. All squads form a perimeter around the breach. Make sure any Titan already within Trost doesn't make it to Eren and the Elrics. The garrison soldiers grappled onto the buildings, watching the different roads and streets for any incoming Titans. Under the weight of the large rock, Eren made his continual advance towards the breach. "This thing is heavy, it's putting strain on me. This would have been impossible with the boulder at full weight. I would have been walking at crawling speed." Mikasa and Armin were with Eren every step of the way as they crossed the wooden bridge over the trenches, towards the breach, the impaled Titans gashing their teeth and trying to reach out to him. More Titans were now trying to enter and were pushing the others further into the spike in an effort to enter Trost. Ed, Alphonse, Rico, and Mina watched as Eren's Titan tower over them as he reached the breach. "Everyone, stand clear," yelled Rico. They moved further to the side of the wall. Eren lifted the large rock above his head and slammed it into the breach, covering most of the hole. A powerful gust of air almost blew those nearby off their feet, they all raising their hands to cover their faces. Eren's Titan then took a few steps back, turned around to face the city. He was watched by the garrison soldiers, Ian, Mitabi, and his friends from the rooftops of nearby houses and stone pillars scattered around. Eren dug deep inside himself and let out a deep, deafening roar. "We're all born free." His Titan collapsed, its body landing on the wooden bridge while its head hit the hard stone ground. Mikasa and Armin rushed towards its nape to free Eren from the Titan's carcass. Seeing their opportunity, Ed and Al rushed towards the large stone ball, clapping their hands together and slammed their palms onto the large rock, transmuting it into the exact shape of the breach. Alphonse then fused the newly formed rock into the ground while Ed transferred mass from the ground to the rock to strengthen it, sealing the hole. "It's done," yelled Ed as loud as he could to convey the message not just to Ian, Mitabi, and Rico but to all the garrison soldiers around them. A loud cheer rang across the area as Rico placed a yellow flare into her pistol with a smile on her face and a single tear in her eye. Ed and Alphonse watched as all around them people celebrated the hard-fought victory. A feeling of pride washed over them as they achieved their first accomplishment for the people here, their first victory in this world and their first tangible step closer to achieving their goal. Mina watched, still hanging off the wall, as everyone cheered. She held back the tears which threatened to escape her eyes, only this time she was overcome with a sense of great joy instead of anguish. She zipped over the Elrics. "Mina," said Alphonse cheerfully, "thanks for Dash." "Thank you," she said and hugged them both. "I don't know if we could have done this without you." "Don't mention it," said Ed while Alphonse patted her on the back. "Thanks for taking out that big Titan before," said Alphonse. "That was really brave of you." "We've done it," whispered Ian as he and Mitabi watched the yellow flare fly upwards into the sky, form the stone ground. "Humanity's first victory," he proclaimed. "Hey!" came a voice from their side. Ian and Mitabi turned to face him, their eyes widened when they saw who it was. "Captain!" exclaimed Ian as he, Mitabi and Rico saluted him. Eren emerged from the neck of the fallen Titan in a cloud of steam. Armin tugged on his body with all the strength he could muster in an effort to free him, but Eren's arms had become fused to what looked to be nerves within the neck. Ed, Alphonse, and Mina ran up to them. Seeing Armin struggle, Ed grabbed Eren by one arm while Armin grabbed him by the other. Eren was hot, burning. Ed almost reflexively moved away when he felt the heat emanating from Eren. They both pulled at Eren until the nerves which engulfed his hands had been ripped from him. Mikasa rushed over to Eren's freed body. "Eren, are you all right?" she asked, her hand cupping his cheek. Eren grumbled in response, his eyes slightly opened. His vision was extremely blurry, but slowly, as it cleared, he was able to make out the people around him. Armin and Ed lifted his arms onto their shoulders. They turned around to see Ian, Rico, and Mitabi talking to someone in front of them. The three of them looked tense. The guy had his back was facing the Elrics and the cadets. He was shorter than them. He had short straight black hair with an undercut. He was wearing what looked to be the same uniform as them but wore a green hooded cape with a different insignia to the crossed swords of the cadets and the roses of the garrison. The design looked to be two wings, one blue and the other white. "The wings of freedom," muttered Aaron, still in a daze. The guy then turned his head to face the group behind him. He had narrow gray eyes on an expressionless face like Annie and wore a cravat with his uniform. He scanned the open space littered with stone pillars and spikes around them along with the large evaporating titan carcass behind them. "So, kiddos," he said in a tone of voice which was both calm and intimidating, "mind telling me exactly what the hell just happened here?" Chapter 12, Our Own Reasons. Aaron jolted up from his slumber, his eyes adjusting to the darkness of the dimly lit room as they frantically looked around. Before him were two people and a set of dark metal bars standing in between him and them. He instantly recognized the people in front of him. The guy with the blonde hair with an undercut, blue eyes with thick eyebrows and tall large build was Commander Irwin, the head of the scout regiment, and next to him was Captain Levi, humanity's strongest soldier. "Any questions?" asked Irwin. "Yeah," replied Ed, sitting up from his own bed to the right of Aaron, who turned to face him. He then turned to his left to see Alphonse also sitting on his own bed. "Just who you two are exactly?" "I'm Irwin Smith, commander of the scout regiment, and the fellow to my side is Captain Levi," he announced. His voice was deep and radiated authority. "Where are we?" asked Aaron, stuttering on his words. "It should be quite obvious. You boys are in a dungeon. You're held under the custody of the military police," responded Irwin. "Can you believe it? We helped save a city from Titans and were treated like public enemy number one," said Ed in an annoyed manner. "I don't expect a hero's welcome, but a thank you would have been great, and maybe food that wasn't moldy bread would be nice too." "TCH, cocky little shit," Levi remarked, rolling his eyes. "Who you calling little, you pint-sized midget with a bad haircut?" taunted Ed. Levi raised one of his slender eyebrows at the insult, looking almost taken aback. The military police officers guarding the cell snickered at the insult, causing Levi to shoot them a look which had the guards biting their tongues very quickly. Aaron was stunned that Ed had so brazenly thrown an insult at humanity's strongest soldier straight to his face. Alphonse attempted to defuse the situation by asking a question of his own. "So what is the scout regiment?" he asked, a benign question but one that would avert from a confrontation. "A good question. The Scout Regiment's responsible for exploration and the eventual reclaiming of former human territories from the Titans by setting up bases outside the walls," he explained, "though as of late our main priority is sealing the breach in Shiganshina district and reclaiming the lands within Wall Maria." "What happened to the others who were with us?" asked Aaron, concerned for the well-being of his closest friends. "Don't worry about them, they're being interviewed along with anyone else who has come into contact with you boys." Irwin then reached into his pockets. In his right hand he held Aaron's key and in his left hand he held Ed's pocket watch. "I assume these belong to you. This is your key, Cadet Jaeger? And this pocket watch, this belongs to you, Edward Elric?" "Yeah, it is," replied Aaron. "Could you give that back? It's not exactly polite to take another person's stuff without their permission," said Edward. "They'll be back in your possession in due time," assured Irwin, "but first let's talk. Cadet Jaeger, your basement back in Shiganshina, from what I've heard there's a pretty big secret concerning the Titans, am I correct? And Elrics, apparently you two were sent here from a different world to help us defeat the Titans." Aaron shifted on his bed, uncomfortable. "Yeah, I think so, or at least, that's what my dad said." "Yes sir," said Alphonse. "Two impossible claims and no way of verifying them," remarked Levi. "How very convenient." "There's no need for that. We've already been through this, and they have no reason to lie," countered Irwin. "However, that's all we know for now. How about you boys enlighten us on your intentions?" "Intentions?" asked Aaron while Ed and Alphonse stayed quiet. "Yes, here's the situation. We'd like to find out what exactly is in your father's basement. It might be the key to defeating the Titans once and for all, and the best way of doing that is sealing up the breach in Shiganshina as you three had done in Trost. So naturally we'll need the abilities you boys possess in order to do that. Any way you think about people with seemingly inhuman abilities are going to decide the outcome of this war. It's almost certain that both the Armored Titan and the Colossal Titan are the same as you, Cadet Jaeger, and we don't know whether there could be more people from your world being sent here, Elrix, which is why I'm asking your intentions. You boys could be humanity's greatest advantage. I noticed that this pocket watch has a very intricate design, looks official, and within the watch was this folded, masterfully drawn portrait and an engraving on the case. Don't forget 3rd of October 10. Do they happen to link with your intentions? Portrait? Asked Ed. This Erwin then opened the watch, picking out a small folded piece of paper. He carefully unfolded it, held it up gaps in between the bars and revealed it to Th. Ed's eyes widened when he saw it. It was a photograph of him, Winry and Alphonse. It was one of the first pictures they had taken of Th all together when Al got his body back. That's why she wanted me to keep it. Aaron looked at the portrait. He'd never seen something so detailed. It was as if someone was able to capture the moment exactly on a piece of paper. Would I be correct in thinking that you two are agents who were sent here under the directive of your government? Asked Erwin. No, you wouldn't, said Ed. Look, I'm going to be honest. Yes, I used to work for the military back in our world as something called a state alchemist. They even used to call me Fullmetal, but I didn't join out of some great love or loyalty for my country. I just needed the money to fix a mistake we'd done in our childhood, which relates to that date. I quit a few years ago after it was solved, and Al was never a part of the military. So no, I wasn't sent here by the government. Hell, after everything that's happened back on our world, the last thing they'd want is to be sucked into something like this. We're here by choice, said Ed. He thought that by being open with the commander it would ease suspicion and prevent the possibility of being found out down the line and having to go through another conflict with this world's military. We were sent here as part of a deal by something called the Truth, or God, if you can believe it. Aaron gasped at what Ed had said. Levi's eyes widened slightly while Erwin still listened intently. From Ed and I's understanding and encounters with it, the Truth regulates people's ability to perform alchemy, our abilities, and punishes those who try to play God with alchemy. Alphonse continued, a few days ago it grabbed us and made us a deal. It'll grant us a demand which would allow us to bring back the loved ones who we lost, but first we had to help you guys defeat the Titans and secure a future where you could live on for generations. So save our lives, and in exchange you get to bring people back from the dead. Asked Levi, and I'm guessing after you've completed your mission you'll leave back to your world with all your newly resurrected loved ones in tow. Yeah, said Ed. A noble cause, Elrix, remarked Erwin. What about you, Cadet Jaeger? He thought about it. In his mind he relieved the moment when the Colossal Titan broke down the gate. When the Armored Titan broke through Wall Maria, his mother was eaten, and the night he made his promise, he'd kill every last Titan. I want to join the Scout Regiment and kill every last Titan, replied Aaron with an almost crazed look in his eyes. His intentions weren't as noble as the Elrics, but he was every bit, if not more so, determined to see it through. Seems like our paths have all joined onto one road, saving humanity, and it looks like the best way to achieve that is to seal the breach in the Shiganshina district, remarked Erwin. Joining the Scout Regiment would put you on a straight path towards your objective. I wager that helping us reclaim Wall Maria and Shiganshina district would be more than enough to keep your end of the deal, with this being called the Truth. But I will warn you, over the course of the 4 years since the fall of Wall Maria, the efforts to lay a path to the breach has cost us 60% of our soldiers, and the mortality rate of new trainees on their first expedition beyond the walls is 30%. Mind you, these are trainees who've had 3 years of training, which you two don't have. So knowing all this, I ask you, Edward Elric, Alphonse Elrix, will you join us? Is your resolve to save humanity on this earth, to see the ones you love again, greater than your fear of dying? They paused for a moment, fully taking in the offer before them. When they'd jumped into this place and this war against the Titan, they didn't have a clear objective or any clear idea of what they needed to do to defeat the Titans. Helping them recapture the area around Wall Maria would be almost the perfect way to go about it. But the survival rate did cause some hesitation. If only 40% of people who were trained to fight Titans actually make it back alive, then what were their odds? We'll do it, said Ed in a tone of voice matching his and Al's resolve. We'll join the Scout Regiment. Good to hear, said Erwin with a sly smile on his face. And final question, is it possible you can use your powers to quickly rebuild a gate in Trost? Yes, we can do that, said Alphonse. Wonderful, replied Erwin. His calm and authoritative tone now had a hint of playfulness. Well, I can't say I'm not impressed with your reasons, even though I think you three are all completely way in over your heads. Said Levi. Erwin, tell the brass I'll be the one responsible for them. He moved forward and gripped the bars, scanning the three in the cell. Not that I trust them, of course, it's more a matter of keeping an eye on them in case the Elrics betray us or Jaeger goes rogue. I'm sure they'll trust that I'm more than capable to putting them down if it comes to that. He paused to allow his thinly veiled threat to sink in. Congratulations, Jaeger, Elrics, welcome to the Scout Regiment. It's settled then, said Erwin, standing from the chair. You boys will have to endure this for just a little longer. Make no mistake, we are doing everything in our power to see you three out of this cell. Aaron slowly opened his eyes, waking up from his sleep. It must have been hours, maybe even a day since him, Ed and Alphonse spoke with Commander Erwin and Captain Levi. He shifted his head to the left to see Alphonse lying down with his head facing the wall, still asleep. He then shifted his head to his right to see Ed biting down into a piece of bread. The chains on his shackles clanked to the movements of his arms. He turned to face the guard by the cell. Hey, can I have some water? He asked the guard. No, was the reply. You're not getting anything, you monster. Aaron was taken aback by the insult, slightly flinching. Asshole, muttered Ed. They gave you some more bread? Said Aaron. Yeah, it's moldy, but I'm hungry, replied Ed as he bit down into the piece of bread again. Aaron, as he sat up on his bed, his eyes slightly widened when he saw that Ed's left foot was encased in metal. Upon closer examination, Aaron could see the screws and details. His foot was either encased in metal or it was made out of metal. Staring at my leg, huh? Said Ed, startling Aaron. He then placed the half-eaten piece of bread on the dresser next to his bed and with both hands rolled up his trouser sleeve to reveal that his leg up to his knee was replaced with some kind of metal prosthetic. Aaron was amazed at what he saw. He then looked down at his own leg, the one which had been bitten off by that Titan during the Trost evacuation, and looked back at Ed's leg. During the time he'd never have guessed that Ed was missing his left leg. He was fast and didn't move with a limp. Their world must have advanced technology far beyond what he could comprehend. It's called automail, metal prosthetic which works just as well as a real limb. He demonstrated by wiggling his metal toes. Of course the surgery and recovery was hell. Coughed up blood for a couple months and it aches whenever it rains. Aaron wondered what could have happened to Ed for him to have the lower half of his leg replaced by this metal prosthetic. Then he remembered Ed mentioning something about fixing a mistake he and Al made. Sorry if I'm prying, but is your leg related to that accident you told Commander Erwin? Asked Aaron innocently. Ed thought about whether he should tell him or not. It was a personal story and a painful one at that. But they were going to be working with Aaron closely for the foreseeable future until they plug up Wall Maria, so building a relationship would be a good idea and being open to the guy would be a start. Plus he was on the same boat as them. The three of them would be considered freaks in this world and it's not like he could judge them for committing a taboo in alchemy when he and Al were the only ones on this planet who could perform it. Yeah, we did a stupid thing involving alchemy. It cost me my leg and my right arm at the time. He said, raising his right arm up. Aaron looked at his arm. It looked like a normal human limb. It cost me a lot more, said Alphonse, causing Aaron to shift his head towards him. Alphonse was now sitting up, a mug of water in his hand. He had woke in time to hear his brother talking about his automail leg and Aaron's question. We carried out something called human transmutation. We tried to bring our mother back to life. He said solemnly. She died when we were young and our dad was away at the time, so it was just Ed and I by ourselves. It went wrong and we ended up making a huge mistake. It took something like 5 years trying to set things right. We put ourselves through hell and it almost got us killed at times, but we succeeded and got everything back. I got my arm back and Al got, well, everything back. Finished Edward. He looked down at his leg and tapped on it. Well, I got almost everything. Aaron was speechless after hearing their story, the loss they had to endure and their journey to rectify their mistake. They may have not faced monstrosities like he did, but these two had been through their own hell. He felt humbled that they would tell him and slightly guilty for prying into their life and for being the first to hear this. They had agreed that they'd sit down and talk about this with everyone. My mother, stuttered Aaron, when the Titans attacked our home she didn't make it. Tears threatened to escape Aaron's eyes as he recalled those terrible events as his hands gripped the blanket over him. A family friend managed to save me, Kasa and I, but not her. A Titan was coming and she just told us to run. I saw her get. Aaron, you don't have to say any more, we understand. Ed interjected. Ed and Alphonse listened to Aaron's story, horrified by what they had just heard. No one should have to see their mother die in front of them at such a young age, but to see your mother killed in the most horrible way possible. They remember feeling powerless as they saw their mother's body on the floor one night. They couldn't imagine how Aaron felt when he saw his mother being eaten. That's why I hate them. They took everything from me, everything from all of us who live on this world, our families, our friends, our homes, our very freedom. That's why I want to kill them, and I won't stop until I've put every single one of them into the ground," he said, driven by his bloodlust. Suddenly the sound of a door opening and shutting interrupted them, and the three of them turned to face the metal bars. Were greeted by two individuals, who, by the looks of the insignia on their brown jackets, were part of the scouting regiment. One of them was a woman who looked to be about their height, had dark brown hair done up in a ponytail, wide light brown eyes, and wore thick-rimmed glasses, and the other one was a man who was as tall, if not taller than, Berthold, but this guy also had a large build, with blonde hair parted in the middle and a dark mustache and beard. The two looked at them for a few seconds before the woman rushed up to the bars of their cell, gripped the bars and stared at the three of them intensely for a few seconds. "Gah!" exclaimed Ed, startled by the unusual introduction, while Aaron and Alphonse moved away. "Hello," she said in an overtly friendly manner. "Aaron Yeager, Edward Elric, and Alphonse Elric if I'm not mistaken. Sorry for the wait, boys, but it looks like we can finally get you three out of here." The three of them smiled at the good news. "Though you'll need to put on these, also Elric's, these ones were specifically designed for you." She handed them 3 pairs of handcuffs. One had a metal chain in between the shackles, while the other 2 had a metal rod in between the shackles. "They seem acutely aware of the fact we perform alchemy by clapping our hands," thought Ed as he was put in shackles with his hands behind his back. On wall of rows above the entrance into the newly reclaimed Trost district, Commander Pixis and Commander Irwin discussed the trial of Aaron, Ed and Alphonse. "I'm confident you are aware of the military police's plan to assume custody of Cadet Yeager and the Elric brothers, yes?" asked Commander Pixis. "Yes, I was briefed on this yesterday. They plan to hold a debate on the subject," replied Irwin. "The decision is ultimately Zachary's to make on whether those 3 end up in the Scouts or the military police," mentions Pixis. "Zachary?" questioned Irwin. "Chief Darius Zachary?" "Yes, and I'm guessing that the factors he will weigh up are whether these boys are either assets or threats to our survival, and whether they can be trusted or not," stated Pixis. He took out his canteen from his side. "If it's the latter, then those boys will executed, on the spot if need be," he said grimly as he swirled the contents of his canteen around for a bit. "Those boys were instrumental to the Trost recovery operation, and it would pain me to see them die. I know that team leaders Ian Dietrich, who was in charge of their protection during the operation, Rico Bertsinska, and Mitaby Jarnach will vouch for them if called upon. However, there is fierce debate within garrison ranks over those 3 boys, and I fear picking a side would deepen any divide that are forming, so my hands are tied. The most I can do is disagree with the MPs. Tell me, do you think you can win the argument? As it stands, the case for the Elrics can be made, although I don't know if Nile Doc might have something up his sleeve to use against them, and for Cadet Yeager that's going to be difficult. But nonetheless, we still have a proposal prepared and argue the case for all 3 of them joining the Scout Regiment," responded Irwin. "How all that will work out will be based on how the debate unfolds." "Thinking on your feet, huh?" said Pixis curiously. "Thinking on our feet is how we've always done it in the Scout Regiment," replied Irwin. Outside of a beautifully constructed building, Nile Doc, the commander of the military police, along with a squad of his officers, awaited the arrival of Commander-in-Chief Darius Zachary for the court case over the fate of the Aaron Yeager and the Elric brothers. Over the past few days, news of these 3 had spread across Wall Rose and Wall Sina, sparking intense debate over their existence and their purpose to humanity. Emotions and passions were high as protests and riots from the regular citizens erupted across the districts and even within the capital itself in support of the 3 against those within the elite of society, the gun-owning aristocrats, the clergy, and members of the central government who believed the 3 to be nothing but a threat to the walls. Fear of a civil war breaking out over these 3 was becoming a terrifying possibility. "Savior," he muttered with a hint of disdain in his voice, his arms folded while tapping his left foot impatiently. "Angels, what a bunch of nonsense. The common folk will believe just about anything. If these rumors get out of hand, then it's very likely we'll have a rebellion to deal with," said one of the military police officers. "No, that won't happen," the legend of these three will die here, he said. It'll be a cold day in hell before I let a group of freaks and spies get added into the ranks of the scout regiment. He then spotted the approaching cart of the commander-in-chief. Form ranks, he ordered as the squad lined up with Nile at the front. The cart to the door was opened and out stepped the Darius Zackley. All hail to the primer, he announced as he and his men saluted. Chapter 13, Words Have Power. The three of them were marched along a long corridor while being escorted by two armed guards with unicorn emblems on their jackets and the two scouts who they thought were here to get them. My name's Hang Zoe, I'm a squad leader in the scout regiment and my friend here is also a squad leader for the scouts, his name is Mike Zacharias, she said while Mike sniffed the boys, leaning down and taking a few whiffs of them. Aaron and Alphonse cringed as Mike sniffed them. Hey, ever heard of personal space? Asked Ed in an annoyed manner as Mike sniffed him. Don't mind him, he always does this when meeting new people. Laughed Hang, he doesn't mean it in any threatening manner and beside his quirks he's a skilled squad leader. There was a few seconds of uncomfortable silence as the group continued to walk down the corridor. Oh, would you look at that, we're already here, she said pretending to be concerned, but you know what, it's better if I just don't explain anything, she finished with a smile. Huh, said Aaron. Wait, what the hell going on? Said Ed, before they were pushed past the large doors by the guards. Don't worry about a thing boys, just speak from the heart, she responded, and remember boys, we're all counting on you three, she finished, the doors slamming shut. They looked around to find themselves in a large courtroom, with a large tapestry on the ceiling and rows of seats on the left and right side on a well-polished marble floor. There were balconies above them and in front of them, an open space with 3 elevated platforms and a large desk in front of what looked to be a throne with the 4 insignia of the military branches above it. They stood there in awe at the place. A courtroom, thought Aaron. We was underneath a courtroom. Suddenly the barrel of a rifle was then roughly shoved into their backs. Hey, keep moving, said one of the guards. They entered the open space and were told to each stand on an elevated platform, with Ed in between Aaron who was to his left, near the scouts, and Al to his right, near the military police, and get on their knees as a metal pole was placed to lock their shackles and hold them on the spot. Won't be able to perform alchemy if things get messy, thought Ed. Aaron looked around the room, examining the faces of the people in the room. He looked to his right to face the military police who were led by Nile Doc, holding what looked to be sheets of paper in his hands, and to his left he saw Commander Pixis along with Ian, Rico, and Mitabi, Commander Irwin with Captain Levi and Mikasa, Armin, and Mina. Mina, mouthed Alphonse to her. Mikasa, Armin, Aaron thought as he stared at them. The three of them stared back at Aaron. Ed, and Alphonse, Mikasa and Armin were discussing the trial and what become of them, what might happen to Aaron during lunch, while Mina was talking to Annie when suddenly a member of the military police called out their names to act as witness and if need be to provide testimonies at court. The sound of a door creaking open caught the attention of everyone in the room, and out stepped a large old man with gray hair and beard wearing glasses. He walked up to the chair and placed his jacket neatly on the desk. Who's he? Whispered Ed to Aaron. That's Premier Darius Zackley, he's in charge of all branches in the military, responded Aaron. So shall we begin, said Darius. So your names are Aaron Yeager, Edward Elric, and Alphonse Elric, yes? Yes, they responded. Aaron Yeager, as a soldier you have pledged to give up your life in service for the public, yes? Yes sir, responded Aaron. In ordinary times your case would have been treated as a court-martial, however these aren't ordinary times, as we have the Elric brothers who, although aren't part of any military branch, are also on trial. Their involvement in the Trost recovery operation and desire to join a branch of the military, specifically the Scout Regiment, means I have decided to treat them as soldiers. As such I will decide which branch of the military you three will fall under custody of and ultimately whether you three live or die, announced Darius. Any objections? No, they said after some hesitation. Ed had a bad feeling about the whole situation. He, Al and Aaron were now at the mercy of this man and their hopes were now pinned on Commander Irwin making a convincing case on their behalf. Very good, replied Darius in a monotone voice. Now as many in this room must know, your existence and arrival has led to intense debate these past recent days within these walls. Some call you boys demons, monster, and a very threat to humanity, while others call you a savior and angels who sent here to save the human race. As expected, we couldn't keep your existence a secret, and if we fail to produce a public statement on such, we run the risk of widespread civil unrest. A decision must be made, and the regiment who shall hold custody of you three will determine your fate, the military police or the scout regiment. He paused, allowing the information to sink in for a few seconds. The military police shall present their case. Thank you, Premier, he said. I'm Nile Doc, the commander of the military police. Our recommendation is this: we shall have a thorough examination of Aaron's anatomy, and as for the Elrics, their outsider status of not just within these walls but within this very world makes them an unknown variable and an all too likely threat to us. As such, we shall place them under interrogation to extract any crucial information they may possess. After this, we shall have the three of them disposed of immediately. Aaron, Ed, and Alphonse mouths were all agape at what he was saying. He'd have Aaron cut open and killed, the Elrics tortured and then afterwards killed as well. Armin, Mikasa, and Mina grimaced when they heard the proposal. While we acknowledge the vital role they had in the recovery of Trost, as the Premier has stated, their mere existence has inspired rebellious sentiment, with those who control the reins of power viewing them as a threat and the masses who view Aaron as a savior and Elric's angels sent from heaven, mainly within Walrose and its surrounding districts. As such, for the greater good, when we have extracted all the information that we can from them, they shall be made martyrs for humanity. He finished. Ed was about to yell at Nile Doc's response at his proposal. If these bastards think they can torture and kill me and my brother, then they're completely deluded. Unacceptable, yelled the person standing next to Nile. He was old, had short hair, sunken in eyes, and wore a black robe and some kind of big necklace around his neck. Aaron is nothing more than a pest who has slipped past the divine protection of the walls, and these brothers are demons, false shepherds who claim to be angels. They talk of this other world to lead us away from the divine protection of these walls. What a nutcase, thought Ed as he listened to the priest's ramblings with a perplexed look on his face. Wall cultists. They're the ones who have made putting cannons on the wall a difficulty, thought Aaron. 5 years ago nobody would listen to them, now they're gained some power. Minister Nick, please settle down, asked Darius. Now I wish to hear the proposal presented by the scout regiment. Please don't mess this up, thought Ed and Alphonse. Thank you, Premier, said Erwin. I am Erwin Smith, the commander for the scout regiment. We propose that Aaron Yeager, Edward Elric, and Alphonse Elric be inducted into the ranks of the scout regiment so that we can utilize their abilities to retake Wall Maria. That is all, he finished, still keeping that calm, authoritative demeanor. Is that all you have to say, Erwin? Asked Darius. Yes, sir. With Aaron's Titan strength and the Elric's alchemic abilities, we stand a good chance of reclaiming Wall Maria. Our priorities are clear. We're so dead, thought Ed. A bold plan, Erwin. Of course I ask, where will you set up your base to launch your expeditions outside the walls in future? Asked Darius. Commander Pixis, from what I've read the wall in Trost is completely sealed, correct? Yes, and it's likely that the entrance shall remain sealed, responded Pixis. I respectably disagree with Commander Pixis' assessment, said Erwin. I have been informed by the Elrics that they could construct an entrance using their alchemic abilities, meaning that we can set up base back in Trost, and this also means that the last 4 years of work in forming a supply route won't go to waste. You will risk the supply path you've set up for 4 years if those three are allowed to join the scout regiment, stated Nile. You're talking about opening a hole in Trost when it was just sealed up a few days ago, cried a person standing on the side of the military police. Madness. Clearly the best course of action is to seal up all the entrances, since they're the only places the colossal Titan can break through and be done with this war. We can't continue to fund these suicide missions just so a bunch of soldiers can play hero. That's a lot of bullshit for a pig, remarked Levi in a cold, intimidating manner. Do you really believe that the Titans will just allow us to strengthen our defenses and wait for their turn? And when you say we, I'm assuming you mean you and your gluttonous merchant friends. Are you so out of it that you don't realize that there are people struggling to get by because we don't have enough land? Look. All I'm saying is that sealing the gates may be our only way to guarantee our safety. You heretic, hold your tongue. These walls are a gift from God. Are you suggesting that we humans tamper with God's creation? The minister continued to go on a rant about the divinity of the walls, leaving to looks of discomfort and disgruntled expression by most in the room. Suddenly the echo of a hand slamming on the table broke the minister's rant. Order, I suggest you save your sermones for a more appropriate occasion, said Darius. Slightly annoyed now, I'll ask you three a question. Eren Yeager, as a soldier, will you use your Titan abilities for the benefit of humanity? And Elric brothers, can you pledge right here and now that, in the time you will spend here as soldiers of humanity, your allegiance is to the people within these walls, and that you'll follow the structure of command as subordinates to your superior officers? Yes, sir, replied Eren eagerly. Yes, replied both Ed and Alphonse, we promise to do so. Alphonse added. Interesting, because the reports produced by the garrison officers responsible for your safety state otherwise, remarked Darius. Eren Yeager, it states that soon after you transformed into a Titan you had tried to attack Edward Elric and looked to be preparing to attack Cadet Mikasa Ackerman before you were incapacitated by Edward Elric, as presented by multiple people who witnessed the event occur. Eren moved back sharply and gasped. He shifted his head to Ed, who looked at him and shrugged. And then to Mikasa, who was giving angry glares to the garrison officers standing to her right. And Elric's, it says here that after the red flare was fired into the sky signaling for a retreat, instead of waiting on the order of team leader Ian Dietrich, you both instead abandoned your squad and effectively broke the chain of command. And on top of this, Edward, you had mentioned a one Moshew, a brigadier general. By all accounts you talked of him as if you were once a subordinate to him, which puts into question your allegiances. Ed turned his head to look at the garrison officers. That was my promise to you. Ed thought that we would make sure the deaths in Trost meant something. Rico looked at Ed and Alphonse as if she wanted to apologize and explain why she had to mention it. He then turned to face Darius. Moss Hughes wasn't my superior officer, he was a friend of Al and I back on our world who died a few years ago. Were you ever part of the military back on your world? Asked Darius. Ed thought about whether he should answer that question honestly. If I tell them I was a state alchemist, they'll send Al and I to the military police for sure, but how do if this isn't some kind of test of honesty? He knew that the three of us wanted to join Scout Regiment, so Erwin must have told him that. Maybe he told him about what I said. I was, but Alphonse wasn't. Ed stated clearly. I used to be a state alchemist, but that was a few years ago, and since then I had resigned my government license. I don't work for my government, Al, and I came here out of our own choice to help you people. The government back on our world has no interest in you. Hell, there was just a huge change in leadership, and the last thing they want is to be caught up in other countries' affairs, let alone other worlds. With respect, Premier, but how can we trust their word knowing that they were employed by their world's military? Questioned Niall. How can we ever trust that their allegiances are towards us and not still to their government? For all we know, they could have been in constant contact with their world, relaying information about us and our military capabilities. And as for Cadet Eren Yeager, our investigation of him has revealed that 6 years ago he and Cadet Mikasa Ackerman had killed 3 slave traders at just the age of 9 years old. Gasps and whispers could be heard across the courtroom. Ed and Alphonse both looked at Eren. They couldn't imagine what that must have been like, to take another person's life at such a young age. While this was in self-defense, one cannot help but question the violent nature of the act. Niall Doc raises some good points, said Darius. Cadet Mina Carolina, in the report it's said you were the first to encounter the Elrics. Can you clearly and truthfully state whether you had seen any suspicious activity from the Elric brothers to suggest that they are operating under the orders of a foreign power? None, sir. She said as confidently as she could. In the time I've known them, all they've done is try be as helpful as they could to us, in many cases putting themselves in harm's way so that others wouldn't have to, and the only question they ever asked me was how to kill a Titan. Interesting, replied Darius. And what of you, Mikasa Ackerman? Is there perhaps anything you'd like to shed light on? Yes, sir. As far as I know, this is the only account of Eren losing control of his Titan abilities. He had saved my life 2 times before that. Once when I was out of gas facing a 15-meter with only a blunt blade, and the other time was when he shielded Armin, Mina, the Elrics, and I from a cannonball. And what about you, Ian? Anything to add? Asked Darius. Yes, Premier. While it is true that the Elrics broke the chain of command, I believe their reason to do so was justified. They were determined to make sure the deaths of our comrades didn't go in vain, and they helped in holding back more Titans from entering the city. If they were absent from the battle, then it's safe to assume more Titans would have entered Trost, resulting in further casualties to the garrison elite squads, added Ian. I can testify to that, sir, added Rico. Edward Elric had held back 5 Titans at the entrance long enough for Eren Yeager to place the boulder. Premier, if I may, there are a few problems with their testimonies, one being that they are inclined to be biased in favor of these boys. Mina Carolina owes her life to them and Mikasa to Eren, not to mention the long-standing childhood friendship between the two, and second, while Mina was in close to the Elrics during the evacuation, she wasn't always with them. There are gaps in their time here where they weren't under anyone's supervision, from the moment they got here, the moment of the escape to the HQ in Trost and the time they abandoned the garrison officers, 3 opportunities they could have used to possibly assume contact with their world again, and while their intentions may seem noble, let's not forget they still broke the chain of command. So I ask you, can we really risk it? Can we really put our faith in these 3, put our resources, money, our soldiers, and the very fate of humanity itself in their hands? We're here to help, asshole! Yelled Edward to Niall. We are willing to face the Titans and help you retake your lost land, and you want to kill us instead, throw away 3 possible great assets to use? How did an idiot like you make commander anyways? How do we know their friends are part of it? Cried a random person. They said there were only 2 other survivors of his squad, they could have been their traitors in disguise. Said another. Kill them just in case. Proclaimed another. You leave my friends out of this. Yelled Aaron. They had nothing to do with this. Alphonse looked around with a feeling of anxiety taking over his body. This whole thing had gone from bad to worse, and now it's devolved into a screaming match between the military police against Ed and Aaron. Shut up! Yelled Aaron from the top of his lungs, silencing the courtroom. Look at you all, your only priority is pushing whatever story makes sense to you. You've completely cut yourselves off from the real world. What did you say? Replied Niall. Why does it matter to you? What am I saying? None of you have even seen a Titan before, so why are you so afraid I should just keep my mouth shut? No, if they want to kill me, then I'm going to tell them what I think. What's the point in having power and doing nothing with it? If you're too afraid to fight, then fine, we'll do it instead, but don't stop us from doing it. You cowards. How about for once in your miserable lives you just shut up and get behind the people who want to fight? There was a few seconds of uncomfortable silence. Stand ready! Yelled Niall. Yes, sir, they replied as they lined up a small firing squad at the 3 boys. Crap, what have I done? Thought Aaron. Shit. Got to think of something. Thought Ed. Not like this. Thought Alphonse. But before the MPs could shoot him, Levi had delivered a shift kick to Aaron's cheek, sending a tooth flying out of his mouth and right in front of Alphonse. Everyone turned to watch Levi as he stood there, his leg still off the ground. Before Aaron could compose himself, Levi sent another kick into his gut. He then grabbed him by the hair and collar and pulled Aaron forward to knee him in the head. Everyone watched with their mouths agape as Levi brutalized the Titan shifter. Mikasa was about to intervene and kill Levi, but was stopped by Armin, who grabbed her hand. Mikasa, wait, he whispered as they continued to watch Aaron get kicked repeatedly while Mina, Ed, and Alphonse watched in horror as their friend was getting beaten up, unable to defend himself. Aaron gasped for air before Levis stomped his head into the marble floor. This is just my opinion, said Levi in monotone voice, but I've always found pain to be an effective way of disciplining people. You don't need a lecture, you need to be taught a lesson, and you just happen to be in perfect kicking position. He then continued to kick Aaron, switching from kicking him in the temple to stomping on him. Hey! Yelled Ed, catching Levi's attention. He shifted his head towards him. You think you're a big guy for kicking someone who can't defend themselves? Levi walked over to Ed, who was in the center of the 3. Ed continued to glare at Levi even when he knew he was next to be beaten while locked to this metal pole, unable to perform alchemy. You think you can beat me into submission? Questioned Ed. No, responded Levi, but I know just what to do to have you beneath my feet. Suddenly Ed felt a pair of hands grab from behind his head and forcibly shift it towards Alphonse and Levi. Hey, what are yo dash? His stomach dropped when he realized just what was about to happen. You aren't someone I can beat into being disciplined, but when the people you love comes into the crosshair, then that's an entirely different story, said Levi, who then looked down at Alphonse, who had a look of worry and fear. Levi then grabbed Alphonse by his hair and collar, pulled him forward and kneed him in his face. No. Stop! Yelled Ed as he struggled to free himself from the stranger's grip. Levi then kneed Alphonse in the gut, again and again and again. I'll kill you! Shouted Ed, I'll kill you! As he tried to break free from his restraints, the threats only seemed to intensify the beating as he began kicking Alphonse in the temple. Each time Alphonse cried out in pain. Ow! Cried Ed, as the tears fell from his eyes, forced to watch his brother get beaten in front of him and being unable to do anything. Everyone watched still stunned. Armin had let go of Mikasa, who was now just watching Alphonse get beaten. Both of them looked on, mortified by what they were seeing. Mina shut her eyes, trying to look away, tears falling from her closed eyes as she heard Alphonse's groans of pain and Ed crying out. Nile Doc and the military police watched stunned and wondered whether they should step in, and Erwin watched stone-faced, not a single change in his stern expression. "Stop it," said Eren. "If you're gonna hurt someone, hurt me. He's not a monster, I am." He tried to reason. Mikasa gasped. "Eren, no," she whispered. "Please," said Ed, visibly shaking. "He's my little brother, don't hurt him. I'll do whatever you want, just stop hurting him." He was begging Levi to stop. Levi turned to Ed, kneeled down and picked Alphonse up from his slump by his head and forced him upwards. Alphonse was fighting to stay conscious, blood running down his nose and his face covered in purple marks. He then let go of Alphonse's head, his body falling into a slump, while the person behind Ed released his head, allowing to just look at the ground and try to compose himself. "Sir, I have a proposal," declared Erwin. "There is still too much about Jaeger that we don't know, and the Elrics still remain an unknown factor to us, so I propose this, that the three of them shall be placed under Captain Levi's supervision as a failsafe in case the Elrics betray us or Jaeger goes rogue. We shall conduct a recon mission outside the walls from Karen's for the 57th expedition to track Titan movements in the area. We had deduced that should the Colossal Titan and Armor Titan strike again, their next target could be the next closet entry would be that district. This also provides with the opportunity to put their abilities to the test without endangering the infrastructure we set up from Trost, and if Eren has shown to be in control of his Titan abilities and the Elrics have shown themselves to be dedicated towards the cause of humanity on this world, then the three of them will have proven their value to mankind. The three of them will be kept under a watchful eye," questioned Darius. "Captain Levi, can you guarantee you'll be able to manage them? It's said that between the three of them they've killed over 40 Titans. Their intelligence and abilities would make the dangerous foes, but I can take them down all the same, which means that I can handle them. They'll learn to be obedient under my watch," he said, looking over to Ed, who glared at him with gritting his teeth, tears still falling down his cheeks while still visibly shaking with rage. "Drawback is, of course, is that there'll be no middle ground. Either one of them goes rogue or tries to backstab us, then I'll definitely have to kill them." Darius closed his eyes for a second. "Then I have made my choice. Eren Jaeger, Edward Elric, and Alphonse Elric are to be placed into the custody of the Scout Regiment." After the court case, Eren and Alphonse were sat down on a couch having their injuries examined by Hang, with Edward cleaning the blood from El's face. He placed the soaking wet rag under his brother's nose to wipe away the blood from his upper lip. "You all right?" asked Ed, concerned for El's well-being. "I should be fine," replied Alphonse, hadn't experienced pain like that since teacher. Just then Levi walked into the room. Ed turned around and almost instantly he felt his blood boil. He yelled as he swung his right fist at Levi, who quickly grabbed it with his own right hand. Ed then went to swing with his left hand, and that too was grabbed by Levi. The two of them were now in a standoff, waiting to see who'd break first. Ed glared at him while Levi just continued to look at him with that same expressionless face. For someone who's this short he's pretty strong, thought Ed as he pushed his weight onto him. "Brother!" exclaimed Alphonse. "Ed, what are you doing?" exclaimed Eren, stunned that he'd try to attack Captain Levi. "Edward," said Levi, in a calm manner, "calm down, there's no need for this." "You didn't have to beat my brother," responded Ed angrily, though gritted teeth. "But he had to. If Levi hadn't shown that he could control you, then Darius would have sided with the military police and now you'd be on a wagon for Mitras to be tortured and killed," explained Erwin. "What we did was brutal, but it was necessary to your survival." Anger began to diminish as Erwin explained to him why. He straightened his back and lowered his hands. Levi then moved past Ed and sat on the chair between Eren and Alphonse, who flinched as he sat right next to them. "So boys, are we all on the same page?" asked Levi. "Yes, sir," replied Eren and Alphonse. "Yeah," replied Edward in an angered, hushed tone. "Glad to hear it," replied Levi. "Now Elrics, I've been told that I'm to teach you how to operate the ODM gear in preparation for the coming expedition." "Indeed," said Erwin with a smile on his face. "I'm postponing the expedition by about another month, which should give you two plenty of time to familiarize yourselves the equipment, and you're going to be taught by Captain Levi, a master in ODM gear and someone who was self-taught. Now I won't make any promises that you'll come out it as experts, but at the very least you'll be competent enough to not fly straight into the mouth of a titan. Added Levi, so be prepared, we'll begin training once we get settled into our new base. Ed and Alphonse both looked at each other with wide eyes, trying to imagine what it'll be like to use the ODM gear and soar through the air. Looks like we won't be asking people for piggyback rides anymore, thought Alphonse. Trained by Captain Levi, that's a privilege I would have given anything to have, thought Aaron. Well boys, welcome to the Scout Regiment, said Erwin. I look forward to working with you three. He extended his hand towards them. Yes sir, said Aaron as he enthusiastically shook Erwin's hand, as he realized his life dream. Thank you, said Alphonse, shaking his hand. Yeah, sure, replied Ed hesitantly while he shook his hand, realizing that he and Al took one step closer towards realizing their own goal. Now Aaron, I need to see your mouth, said Hang. Aaron obliged, and opened his mouth. Huh, said Hang as he looked at a full set of teeth. She opened up the handkerchief to reveal the tooth that was kicked out of Aaron's mouth. Your tooth, it grew back. Chapter 14, Members of the Team. This is your uniform, said Levi as he handed the lethargic-looking Elric brothers both a perfectly folded pile of clothes which consisted of a light brown jacket with the white and blue wings insignia on the back, both shoulders, and on the front left pocket, white pants, a teal-colored shirt, a dark brown sash and knee-high boots, and a dark green cloak with a hood. The one thing both Ed and Alphonse noticed about the uniform was the amount of belts that had to be strapped onto it, around their legs, around their waists and around their chests. While you're on duty you'll wear this, and off duty you can wear your civilian clothing again. Now hurry up and get changed, we're leaving soon and we got a long journey ahead of us. Yes, sir, they replied as they were left to change in a room by themselves. They began to change into their new uniform. The belts were a maze to figure out, a series of harness and metal plates that needed to be attached to certain parts of their body. Hey, called out Levi on the other side of the door, what's taking you two so long? Sir, we don't know how these belts work, explained Alphonse. Levi sighed. You decent? He asked. Yeah, replied Ed. With that Levi opened the door and entered the room. All right, pay attention because I'm only going to show you once, he explained. First off, you're meant to put the harnesses on before the jacket, he said, looking unimpressed at Edward. This large leather plate is meant to go on your back. The two smaller metal plates go just above your asses and you're meant to slip into these harnesses feet first and work your way up. These belts are there to tighten the harnesses to your body. This is important to know, it's part of the weight shifting equipment for the ODM gear. Balance is key when it comes to this and could mean the difference between life and death. Following his instructions they managed to work their way through the tangle web of leather. Thank you, sir, said Alphonse. Don't mention it, replied Levi in that same monotone voice. Consider this the first lesson on your crash course of ODM gear. Now hurry up and get your things on the wagon. I'd like to reach our destination today. Ed looked at himself in the mirror, adjusting the green cloak under the collar of his jacket while Alphonse gathered the rest of their things into a suitcase. Back when he was a state alchemist they never expected him to wear the uniform, but this military wasn't as relaxed about it as theirs. If they were going to be a part of the scout regiment they had to look like a part of them. He picked up his pocket watch on a dresser table and checked the time. It was 4:30 in the morning. He placed it in his front right pocket and finally draped his green cloak over his shoulders, buttoning the ends together to hold it in place. Ready to go, Al? asked Ed as he watched Alphonse put on his green cloak. Alphonse picked up the suitcase by the handle. Ready, he replied. It was early in morning and the dawn had yet to come. The only light sources were the torches on the buildings across the city. It was another wall in city like Trost, Hermina, which was connected to Wall Sina, the third and final wall. Ed looked around. Hermina looked like a better developed Trost. The buildings looked to be made of smooth white stone bricks. The roads weren't rough cobblestone and the architecture was stunning, almost angelic in its design. This place looks a lot different from Trost, remarked Alphonse. That's because we're in the interior, said Aaron from behind them. It's part of the innermost wall where a lot of rich folk and merchants live and where most of the military police work. They usually only go into wall rows to do business. Hey brats, called Levi, you three coming? Why yes sir, replied Aaron as he rushed over to his horse. So Elrics, you two know how to ride a horse? asked Levi. He and a bunch of others were already on their horses or at the front of the wagon. We've done it a few times. I even had to cross the desert on horseback, replied Ed as he and Alphonse mounted their horses and grabbed onto the reins. Good, because the only way getting around here is by horses or wagons pulled by horses, responded Levi. Also put your hoods up, we don't want anyone to notice you three. You've got a high profile and getting spotted by the wrong kinds of people could put you in more trouble than you already are. As they left through the main gate into an area within wall rows, Aaron caught up with Ed and Al, who were riding together. Hey, you mentioned riding across the desert, he asked curiously. Yeah, replied Ed. Why'd you ask? Armin, he'd love to hear about it, replied Aaron. When we were little kids he'd show me Kasa and I this book about the world outside the walls, the rivers of fire, the land of ice, the plains of sand he'd call, and the ocean, which was this lake, this never-ending lake. Ed and Alphonse both smiled at Aaron. We'll be happy to tell you guys all about it. We used to do a lot of traveling back on our world. We've been to places like that, though I'm sorry to say we've never been to the ocean. Our country is surrounded by other countries looking to take over us from the north, west and south, and a massive desert to our east. So, in a sense, you're walled in by threats? Asked Aaron. Huh, said Ed, coming to the realization. I guess we are. It was midday when they reached their destination, the old Scout Regiment headquarters, a large, beautifully designed and run-down castle which was in the process of being claimed by nature. As far as castles go, it's something to behold, yes? Asked one of the squad members to Aaron and the Elrics in a condescending tone. He was riding just slightly ahead of them. He had a hairstyle similar to Captain Levi, even wore a cravat, except his hair was a light brown and he looked as though he was in his 40s with the wrinkles on his face. Used to be home to royalty in its time, and after that our headquarters, while it is lavish, it was also very impractical, what with being too far away from any river or walls. But those were the early days back when the Scout Regiment had just formed and ambition fueled the spirits of the first Scouts, and now this enormous ornament has become a holding cell for the Scouts' new weapons. Aaron wasn't paying attention to him. Instead he turned his head to get a look at Captain Levi, who was riding behind them, only to find that Levi had been staring at Aaron and the Elrics the whole time with that same expressionless face. Aaron snapped his head forward as if to avoid making eye contact. Noticing Aaron's reaction, Ed turned his head back to see Levi staring at him. He made eye contact with him and the two were now locked into a staring contest with each other, waiting to see who'd break away first, or at least that how Ed saw it. The captain just stared at Edward, looking unimpressed and apathetic. Listen, rookies, said the old-looking guy. Aaron, Ed, and Alphonse all turned to face him. Don't expect us to be a year beck and call. Excuse me, said Aaron. Titans, alchemists, I don't care. The idea of Captain Levi having to babysit you three pissants makes me sick. He bit down hard on tongue as his horse took a misstep onto a small rock on the path. Blood spurted from his mouth. Aaron panicked slightly and reached out as if to help. Alphonse looked mortified as the guy tried to fumble for a piece of cloth to use while blood dripped from his mouth and onto his uniform, and Ed did his best to hold in his laughter at a guy who just tried to act tough not just a second ago and failed miserably. You should have known better than to mouthy on a horse, said one of the other squad members as everyone was placing their horses into the castle stable. She was maybe the captain's height, had auburn hair, round brown eyes and a pale complexion. She stood over him while he continually placed a wet cloth onto his bite wound. The rookies needed to know their place. First impressions are important, he responded. It's a shame you weren't there to see it. I practically had them shaking in their boots, he said boastfully. Ha! Laughed Ed involuntarily. Both Oluo and Petra turned to look at him. They saw Aaron grimace and Alphonse elbow his brother in the ribs for his rudeness. If that anything to go by, I think the only impression you left on them is how much of a fool you are, Oluo, she said. Well then, I'd say my assumption of those brats was quite accurate then. Oluo responded. What happened to you? She asked. You never used to talk this way before. This is just an observation, but if you're trying to act like Captain Levi, could you please stop? You two have as much in common as wood and rocks. Heh, if you want to have a go at me like a wife, Petra, then you'll just have to get to know me properly before having that honor, Oluo said in an overtly confident tone with a sly grin on his face. Petra sighed. I'd tell you to bite your tongue, but you've already done that, and by the looks of it you've been too carried away because the captain chose you for his squad. Next time I hope you bleed out. Now Petra, I don't think that's a good way to talk to your comrade in arms, replied Oluo. As Ed began to unload boxes from the wagon, he noticed two more people accompany Captain Levi into the stable area. They were both fairly tall, One had brown eyes and long blonde hair done up in a ponytail like Ed, and the other guy had short brown hair and a darker complexion. "Hey, who are those guys?" asked Ed to Aaron as they lifted up another box. "That's Elgin and Gunther Schultz," responded Aaron. Every one of them was hand-picked by Captain Levi for the Special Operations Squad, or Levi Squad. They were all picked because of accomplishments in the field. There are new teammates, and there also are wardens and executors. "Place looks like a complete mess," commented Gunther. "It's been abandoned for years. The whole place has fallen into disrepair." "Then it looks like we have a problem," remarked Levi from behind them. "Best get a broom and get to work." Ed swept the stone floor while Alphonse polished the windowsill of dust from one of the large rooms in this monstrously large castle. Their first job as members of the scout regiment was to help clean this large castle for the rest of the day. Ed wanted to protest but was quickly dragged away by Alphonse before he could get to Captain Levi. "Even in this world I'm still doing chores for people," groaned Ed as he swept the dust and dirt into a metal pan. "It could be worse, brother," replied Alphonse, cleaning the next window. "At least we're not held captive by the military police." "Guess you're right, Al," said Ed. "Hey boys," said Petra holding a broom, standing at the doorway. "Just finished checking up on Aaron. Wanted to see how you two were getting along," she said with a soft simile on her face. "We're doing great, thank you for asking," replied Alphonse, smiling back. "Sorry for Oluo's little display back there, really don't know what's gotten into him," she said apologetically. "I don't mean to be rude, but for a guy in his 40s he sure does act like a young guy with something to prove," said Alphonse innocently. "Oluo? He's not in his 40s, said Petra confused. "He's actually the youngest in the squad." "What?" exclaimed both Ed and Alphonse in complete disbelief. "The wrinkles make him look older than he actually is," said Petra with an awkward smile. "Seems like he's trying to copy Captain Levi, by the way he dresses and talks," remarked Ed. "Yeah, almost everyone in the Scouts admires Captain Levi, though that being said I heard you two had a little confrontation after the court case. Not a lot of people can say they tried to punch humanity's strongest soldier and live to tell about it, and I'm sure even fewer can say they joined his squad right afterwards," laughed Petra. "Usually when people meet him for the first time they're disappointed by what they see. He's not the perfect hero of the scout regiment that everyone make him out to be. For one thing, he's a lot shorter and not someone who's easily approachable. He can even be a bit temperamental at times." "Huh, you know I'd never expect someone like that to be so rigid in following the rules. He seems to work really well with Commander Irwin," remarked Alphonse. "Well, it's like I told Aaron, Captain Levi used to be a big-shot criminal back in the underground before Commander Irwin got him on our side," said Petra. "Irwin looks like someone who means serious business," added Ed as he looked back on his encounter with him back in the dungeon. "Reminds of another guy we know back on our world. Commander Irwin is a great leader. He took charge of the scout regiment after the fall of Wall Maria and came up with the scouting formation, which reduced our causalities by about 30% and has a way of inspiring the soldiers around him. He's maybe one of the best commanders the scout regiment ever had," said Petra, almost beaming when speaking about the commander. "Hey!" yelled a voice from behind them. They all looked to see it was Captain Levi. "What's with all the chatter?" They all tensed up and began to resume their chores. Levi then stepped into the room, knelt down onto the floor and swiped his index finger across one of the titles. He examined his finger and saw a thin layer of dust covering his fingerprint. "Edward, what's this?" asked Levi, showing him his finger. Dust," responded Ed, confused, staring at his finger. Yes, it is," replied Levi as he looked at his finger. He then took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped off the thin layer of dust coating his finger. There were a few seconds of uncomfortable silence. "Do the whole room over again." At the military headquarters in Trost, Commander Irwin was drawing up the plans for the 57th Expedition Beyond the Walls, a recon mission to track Titan movement in the east and also test the abilities of Aaron Yeager and the Elric brothers, with squad leader Mike Zacharias. "We're 60 days out from a mission to monitor Titan movements, and now you're saying that on top of the Elrics who'll have to be trained in ODM gear in amount of time it takes to learn the basics, we're also gonna have a batch of green recruits. If any of them decide to join us, then yes," responded Irwin as he examined his long-range scouting formation. "Not to be cynic, but don't you think this mission is a waste?" Surely our efforts should be focused on improving the infrastructure of the road to Wall Maria and doesn't throwing them into the fray seem rash? Honestly, what are their odds? Our custody of those three is conditional on the results of this mission. We currently have 2 tests to pass, one being that the Elrics can be trusted to serve in the military, so showing them the supply path we laid down from Trost is out of the question for the brass, and we also have to prove Eren is an asset to humanity, not a threat. The best way to accomplish this is for them to demonstrate their abilities in the field to our benefit. The last thing we want is for the military police to throw in their men or anyone else dash. And you don't want to give me a straight answer, responded Mike. Erwin turned to Mike and gave him a sly smile. Your nose is as sharp as ever? Not bad, he commented. Yeah, well, not as sharp as yours on a good day, replied Mike. Trust me, you'll get the facts soon enough. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. If Ed's watch was anything to go by, the squad had just finished cleaning the rooms of the castle and were now sitting down in the castle's servants' mess hall drinking tea. Al and Eren had changed into their regular clothes. They sat in dim candle lights surrounded by darkness and empty chairs and tables. It's likely we'll be on standby for the next couple of days, said Eld, though from what I've heard we're gearing up for a large-scale expedition to track Titan movement in the east and to put you 3 abilities to the test on the field in about 2 months from now, and on top of that they're also adding a bunch of graduates from the cadet crops into the mix. That can't be right, replied Gunther. The cadets have already been put through enough with the Titan invasion at Trost. Why'd subject them to more of this so quickly? I'd assume the majority of them must have been terrified for their life, commented Oluo in a dismissive manner. Is that true, Captain? Asked Petra with a look of concern on her face. It's not my job to plan out mission strategy, that job falls to Erwin, and if there's one thing we know for definite about him is that he keeps an eye on even the smallest bit of detail, commented Levi. That's the truth, replied Eld. Just when we thought the path to Wall Maria that so many people died for was lost forever when the entrance sealed, it turns out humanity has the solution to having the recovery route put into use, and 3 new factors which tip the scales in our favor. Our circumstances remain both altered and unaltered at the same time. Heh, well, alchemy all about balance, joked Ed as he took a sip of his tea. So, you boys know how exactly your powers work? Asked Eld. Ed and Alphonse looked to Eren, letting him go first. Being put on the spot, Eren explained his ability the best he could. If I'm honest, I'm not too sure myself, he confessed, staring at the table. I do know that the trigger seems to be hurting myself. He raised his hand up to his face, drawing attention to it. All right then, replied Eld. He then looked to both Edward and Alphonse. What about you two? Alchemy is something we've learned back on our world. It's a science, the understanding, deconstruction, and reconstruction of matter, explained Alphonse. It's like cooking, you'd need the right ingredients to use and how to use them. So anyone can do alchemy then? Asked Gunther. Well, yes, but it's not easy. You'd need a vast knowledge of the different elements of the periodic table, their atomic structures, the flow and balance of kinetic energy which is within certain material, replied Alphonse. Basically you'd need years' worth of studying in subjects like chemistry and ancient alchemic theory. So what you're saying is that you'd need to be a genius in order to do alchemy, said Gunther. Ho, laughed Oluo. So even if the military police got the information out of you, they wouldn't have known how to use it anyway, the incompetent fools. If what you boys do can be considered a kind of science, then you best be prepared for when she comes, said Levi as he took a sip of his tea. She? Asked Ed. Just then sound of someone slamming into the wooden door echoed across the mess hall. Petra left her seat and removed the lock, letting in the person from the other side of the door. It was squad leader Hang Zoe. Good evening, Team Levi, she said in a upbeat tone, waving at them. Getting comfy in this castle? You're too early, remarked Levi in an almost exhausted tone. Oh well, sang Hang in response. Squad leader Hang, said Eren. Hello boys, if you don't know by now, my job is to spearhead the Scout Regiment's scientific research efforts. Currently I'm conducting experiments on our 2 captured Titan specimens from Trost, but with the arrival of you boys and your amazing abilities there's even now more to research and study. I'd very much like your help, said Hang in a overtly friendly tone. Help with what? Asked Ed, a little bit confused about her statement. What can Al and I do to help with your Titan research? Eren seems like the perfect person. Nonsense, yelled Hang with a crazed hungry look in her eyes. "Oh, I have plans for you boys, we're gonna make strides in scientific research like you've never seen," she proclaimed, her hands making some weird twitching motion. "Sounds like a plan," responded Alphonse with an uneasy smile while both Ed and Aaron looked visibly uncomfortable. "We still need permission from a higher authority," Aaron reminded her. She turned her head towards Levi. She called, "What's the schedule for tomorrow?" "Elrics have the altitude test and Aaron cleaning the weeds," responded Levi. "Well then," she said as she grabbed Aaron's hand, "I'll just have to give you my complete and undivided attention tomorrow, we'll just have to put our focus into Titan experiments." Okay," responded Aaron hesitantly, "just to be sure, what do you mean by Titan experiments?" "Yeah, I'd like to know too," said Edward as he leaned forward. He was interested by Hank's research and curious about the Titans. "Don't encourage her, you idiots," said Oluo. "I see," said Hank as she looked at them like objections of her obsession. "You boys possess a curious mind." Not wanting to listen to Hank spiel on about the 2 Titans they captured at Trost, the rest of Levi's squad left the mess hall for their sleeping quarters. Hank sat down on the empty seat left by Eld and turned to face the 3 of them, and she then became noticeably calmer and less intense. "So boys, let's talk science." Chapter 15, Sharing Information. Firstly, let's discuss the captured Titans in Trost. As a scientist, I first conduct the standard checklists off test we do on all captured Titans. First was an attempt at communicating with them. I ask them if they're in pain, if they have a name, how are they feeling, etc. Explained Hang. However, just as with previous subjects, we could not communicate with them. Instead, any attempt I made to get closer to them resulted in their attempt to devour me. "You should really put a safety line around them or something," said Edward. "Oh, we do. My assistant Moblet is always telling me, 'Hang, stay behind the line. Hang, stop being so reckless. Hang, you want to get your head chopped off.'" She sighed. "He means well." The 3 of them stared at Hang, looking perplexed at what she just said. Anyways, spending time around them in such close proximity helped me cope with the tediousness of day-to-day task. I had even named them. Sunny the 4-meter Titan and Bean the 7-meter Titan, I had named after the leaders of tribe of cannibals famous in human history. The next experiment was sunlight deprivation, where we placed them in large tents and cut off their access to sunlight. You see, Titans are most active in day than in the night. This is where the captured Titans showed individual differences. Sunny had showed signs of energy loss and as a result became sluggish, while Bean had far more lively for a straight 3 hours. The Titans don't require food or water. They have vocal cords but yet don't communicate and don't require the need to breathe, and the only thing their bodies metabolize into energy is sunlight. "Interesting," commented Alphonse. "Have you tried cutting them off from sunlight completely?" "I would, however if I did that then I'd run the risk of killing them," replied Hang. "Then all our work would have been for naught." There was a few seconds of silence before she suddenly sprung from her chair standing and yelled, "Physical pain was the next step. I just had to know whether they experienced pain like us. Those poor babies. I had to hurt them. Stuck a large sharp pole into them." Ed, Al, and Aaron were startled by her sudden outburst and tensed up as if ready for the moment she pounced of them. Hang then sat down again, recomposing herself. "I just had to find out whether they had other weaknesses beside the nape, but the experience was painful," she said, this time in a calm and reserved manner. "What I did notice was that while Sunny didn't seem to react to pain as Sunny did, instead he didn't show anything like a reaction to pain. All he can do is try to bite me." "Squad leader, with all due respect, how can you talk about the Titans this way?" asked Aaron in annoyed confusion. "They're humanity's greatest enemy. They've driven us to the brink of extinction, and yet you act cheerful when talking about them and upset when they're hurt." "You are right," replied Hang. "I seen many of my comrades meet their end in the jaws of a Titan. When I first became a scout I fought them out of nothing but bitter hatred, and then one day I kicked the head of a 3-meter Titan and I was shocked to feel that it was also as light as a feather." The 3 of them gasped at the revelation. Alphonse recalled the moment he saw one of those monsters crush one of the cadets within its own hand. Something like that just seems almost impossible, a complete contradiction in the laws of reality itself. And that's when I noticed something. Despite the mass and density of their body, a severed limb would be as light as tree bark. I've read that your Titan forms out of thin air. What I think is that there's a stark difference between what we can observe and what is really going on." She then poured 3 cups of tea and handed it to the 3 of them. For years the foundation of our strategy has been based on nothing but hatred and spite for the enemy. I'm trying to look at this from another angle even if it ends up being useless, but still, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So, Elrix, I've heard mixed things about your alchemic abilities, care to enlighten me? Asked Hang curiously. Full disclosure, Commander Irwin had briefed me on everything you boys spoke about in the conversation you had with him. She took out what looked to be a small notebook and a pencil. Well, alchemy is the science of deconstructing and reconstructing matter into different shapes, sizes, and material altogether, explained Alphonse. There's a rule in alchemy called equivalent exchange, meaning that in order to create something then something else of equal value must be lost. You can't create or destroy the energy and matter of substances, and something can't just come from nothing. There has to be a source, and on top of that in order to transmute material into different others, they'd need to have a similar atomic makeup and properties of the initial material. Trying to bypass this rule can result in what's called a rebound, where the balance is thrown, which can end badly. Which is why when Aaron managed to create a Titan out of thin air we were shocked. It went against the laws of conversion of mass, said Ed. It went against the very laws of science and alchemy. There was only one other thing that could produce anything from nothing. Said Hang, interested. The cadets we interviewed also touched on something like this. They said that you, Ed, threatened Aaron and asked him whether he was a homunculus. Cadet Mina said that you've claimed to have fought them in your world, and Alphonse, you mentioned something about a philosopher's stone. Care to elaborate on these? She asked. They're artificial humans with the ability to regenerate injuries and had their own unique abilities, stated Alphonse, forming their arm into a spear, forming a carbon fiber layer around their body and an eye which allowed them to see any weakness or opening against an opponent. To name a few, they're made through injecting a philosopher's stone into them. Those guys had it in for humans on our world, even tried to kill off 50 million people overnight, said Ed. Hang and Aaron gasped. 50 million people? That's more than 50 times the amount people that live in the walls almost killed. We managed to stop them, thankfully. It led to a whole regime change in the end. Wait, yelled Aaron, you're saying that there were people who were working with them to kill 50 million people? Yeah, it was mostly the people at the top, the military elites and whatnot, replied Ed, though the leader of the country at the time was a homunculus also, until he was killed during the coup. Damn. I couldn't imagine people doing something like that here, working with the Titans. We may have those wall cultists, but even they aren't conspiring with the Titans, commented Aaron. And what about this philosopher's stone? Asked Hang. How can someone inject a stone into a person? It's not exactly a stone, it can take different forms. It's just that a stone is the most common, said Alphonse. It's the only thing that allows an alchemist to bypass equivalent exchange. Something like that would be invaluable to you too, commented Hang. If we could get our hands on something like that, then it could be the greatest solution to sealing up the breach. Both Ed and Alphonse shuddered at the thought of using a philosopher's stone, knowing the nature of it. Hang and Aaron noticed their discomfort. Look, said Ed, even if you had something like that, Al, and I wouldn't use it. The nature of that thing is just evil. Believe me when I say that it's more trouble and suffering than it's worth. Only a monster would try to create one, and that was just what the homunculus were. All right then, replied Hang in an understanding tone. I won't force you to do anything involving alchemy. You two are the experts on that field, she assured them. Moving on, it said in Rico's report that you couldn't transmute the wall to seal the breach. You said something about understanding the atomic structure and yelled, what is this wall made out of, to Rico? Yeah. To perform alchemy you need an understand of the atomic structure of the material you're working, so if I wanted to transmute this table into something else I'd need to know the atomic structure and elements like hydrogen, calcium, oxygen etc. that make up the wood. And you would need to know this at a moment's notice if you were to use alchemy in a fight, said Aaron. Sounds complicated. It is, but when you put in hours of study and work you get the hang of it eventually, said Alphonse, though my brother and I have been doing this since we were 8 years old. Interesting, remarked Hang. I'm assuming you two believed the wall to be made of bricks and cement and were using that knowledge to try and perform alchemy on it. Yeah, that's right, responded Ed, taking a sip of tea. Do you happen to know what the wall is made out of? Asked Ed. No, just like you boys I'd assume the wall was constructed out of normal building material, but this an interesting development. I'll need to get a hold of a sample of the wall from Trost and examine it. Now back onto the topic. Do other alchemists specialize in certain fields, or is it more general, and what's with the clapping? Do all alchemists do it? Well, both, said Alphonse. You could get alchemist who good at working with all kinds of material on top of having a specialty, like my brother and I. We work with almost just about anything, but for a time we used to mainly work with metals. Or you could get people who specialize in a certain fields. A guy we knew specialized in flame alchemy, and on the subject of clapping our hands to perform transmutation, only a handful of people can do that. Everyone else has to use something called a transmutation circle with different runes for different elements, he said. Hang gave him the notebook and Alphonse drew an example of a transmutation circle. These allow the flow and release of energy to manipulate different substances. Fascinating, said Hang as she examined the transmutation circle drawn by Alphonse. So is that why they called you Fullmetal? Asked Aaron. It wasn't because of your metal leg and arm before you got it back. No, that was part of the reason why, responded Ed. The other reason was because I was very hot-headed at the time. At the time? Slyly questioned Alphonse. Ed shot an annoyed glare in his direction. Edward, if you don't mind, I'd like to examine your metal leg, asked Hang. My hope is that we'd be able to replicate it and produce our own version for soldiers who'd lost limbs to the Titans. Now of course I won't take it apart completely. Moblet and I will examine a certain piece, and only when we feel confident about our understanding of it will we move on to another piece, and you'll need people who are familiar with your metal leg if you'd need it repaired. Think of this as a zero-sum game. Ed thought about this proposal for a second. He thought about how Winry would be angry and upset that someone else had been tinkering with the automail she designed for him, and if they were to do something wrong, then he'd be screwed. But she was right. There wasn't a single person on this earth who could work on his automail, and if the ODM gear was anything to go by, they wouldn't be completely in the dark about handling complex machinery, and if it went to producing some version of automail in this world to help people, then it seemed like a risk worth taking. Yeah, sure, you can examine my automail leg, Ed replied. Wunderbar, she exclaimed. I'll discuss a timetable with Levi on routine examinations. Being able to examine tech like this could spark a technological revolution. Now one more thing I'd like to know, what is this truth or God as you put it, Alphonse? If you don't mind drawing an image of it. She handed Alphonse the book and pencil again. They were both silent for a few seconds. Honestly, everything we know about it we already told Commander Irwin. He regulates people's ability to perform alchemy and punishes those who try to play God. Ed instinctively grips his automail leg. We don't know if it created our world or this world, but whatever it is, it's powerful, and one other thing is, it knows everything about anyone. Finished Ed as Alphonse handed her back the book. She looked at the page to see the outline of what looked like a child, except the only detail was its huge grin standing next to a large double doors with what looked to be a tree on it. Ed yawned. He took his pocket watch from his pocket and checked the time. It was 12 o'clock at night. Hang, we'd love to continue talking, but Al and I have a test with Captain Levi tomorrow, so we'd better get some sleep. Squad leader, I should leave too. We can talk more in the morning, said Aaron. Sure thing boys, replied Hang with a smile. Ed and Alphonse, good luck with your altitude test tomorrow. Ed, Alphonse, and Aaron left the mess hall, leaving Hang alone. She turned back to her notebook, read over her notes, and stared at the crudely drawn image of the truth. Even as a drawing, there was something deeply unsettling about it. Could this be it, the thing that we've been missing? Hang thought to herself. What are you? Hey! Yelled Levi as he ripped the sheets from their beds. You two out of bed, put on your cloaks and head for the stable, now. Ed and Al jumped out of bed and quickly placed on their green cloaks, following Levi to the stables. There they found Aaron, the rest of Levi's squad, another person with the Scout Regiment symbol on their jacket, and Hang, who'd looked as if she had been shaken to her core. What going on? Asked Alphonse, but was cut off by Levi. Get on a horse, we're heading for Trost. Someone's killed the captured Titans. They both gasped, and quickly they mounted their horses and the group of them rode off south for Trost at full speed. It took maybe a few hours to reach the city inner gate. Hoods up, boys, ordered Levi as they entered the city. Ed looked around. It was clear that reconstruction was underway, but a lot of the damage and destruction that scarred the city still remained. They arrived at the scene. It was an enclosed area near the military HQ. The area was crowded with soldiers of the garrison. Hang jumped off her horse. The other guy was quick to follow. Ed and Al assumed that must be Moblet, her assistant. Levi, his squad, Aaron, and the Elrics dismounted their horses and made their way to the enclosed area. You two stand at the entrance, ordered Levi. Aaron and the rest of you, you're with me. Both Edward and Alphonse stood just outside the entrance while the rest of them made their way through the crowd. They watched Hang through the gaps in the crowd. She fell down to her knees as if she'd been defeated and let out loud cries of anguish over the deaths of her captured titans. "No!" she cried, "my poor babies." Ed watched her, a bit perplexed at her reaction. He had known that the titans were important to her for the research and that she may have had a kind of emotional bond to them, but this felt a bit over the top. "Poor Hang," said Alphonse, empathetic about Hang's saddened state. Ed kept his eye on Aaron and Commander Irwin, who looked to be discussing something with each other, Irwin bending down as if to whisper something to Aaron. "What the hell are they talking about?" wondered Ed. Suddenly Irwin turned to face them and began to walk towards them with Captain Levi, catching both Ed and Alphonse's attention. "Commander Irwin," said Alphonse as he clumsily saluted him. "Tell me, Elrix," he said in a tone which was both hushed yet not lacking in authority, "what do you see here? Who do you think the real enemy is?" "The real enemy?" asked Edward, confused, and then he remembered what the truth said to them. Struggle against a powerful force they do not yet fully understand but who seeks to annihilate them. "Before the truth sent us here it told us, you were fighting an enemy you did not fully understand," said Ed. "The real enemy isn't just the titans outside these walls, is it?" asked Ed. "Someone is working for them and I'm willing to bet they're like Aaron." There was a few seconds of intense silence and then Irwin gave a sly smile to them. "Whatever this truth fellow is, looks like it gave you a cryptic briefing, but you still managed to figure it out." His facial expression then became serious. "Come, there is much to discuss." The group of four entered the military HQ and walked up towards Irwin's office. "I want you both to know that once you step in, there is no going back. Anything said here is between us, you understand?" Both of them nodded in response. They entered into Irwin's office. Levi closed the door behind them and leaned against it, while Ed, Alphonse and Irwin sat at the desk. "We have reason to suspect there are enemy spies in the southern division of the 104th Cadet Corps, hiding in plain sight, and we plan on finding out just who they are," said Irwin. "Do you have a list of possible suspects?" asked Alphonse. "No, not yet, but I intend to narrow down the search using the cadets' ceremony tomorrow night, and I know just how I'm going to do it. You see, we've deduced that the enemy shifters are all most likely to be within the ranks of the southern division of the 104th Cadet Corps, the same one as Aaron Yeager and the ones who were in Trost that day. Once the colossal titan had struck, the armored titan should have attacked not long after that. Instead it never showed up. It's as if something happened that caused them to break from their attack." "Aaron showing up," said Alphonse, finishing Irwin's thought. "When Aaron revealed himself they must have made a change of plan." "Exactly," said Irwin with a small smile on his face. He then took out a map of the walls. "The recon mission to track Titan movements in the east and detect a possible attack on Karen's, the next likely Titan target, is nothing more than a ruse. The real purpose is to lure them into trap using Aaron as bait." Both Ed and Alphonse gasped. "This is where you boys will come in. It's been observed that using your alchemic abilities you are able to either incapacitate or kill Titans. I want you to incapacitate the enemy, and from there the rest of us will capture the other shifter." "If you don't mind me asking," said Ed, "but if seems like you planned on us knowing the answer to that question, what if we didn't? What would you have done then?" "I already had a plan in place before I'd asked you to that question. However, since you did know the answer, my original plan has become one of other contingency plans. With you two we can now plan a scenario where we use your abilities to our advantage and lowers the risk in an already high-risk gamble." Ed and Alphonse both thought back to the different cadets they met in Trost. They wondered whether they had already met the spies, talked to them, worse still if they were close to them. "We'll help you capture the enemy spy," said Ed. "Thank you. If we succeed it will bring us closer to defeating the Titans and one step closer to reclaiming Wall Maria. And one step closer on the Truth making good on their deal." Check the description for the links to the author.